Well, you would think that that I planned this mental health series around the reality that Georgia would lose to Alabama. And just the number of people that I know would be struggling this morning with that reality. But the truth is that while Georgia, which I'm a fan of, did lose this game last night, we lost the one that actually doesn't matter. We will win the next one. Okay? If you feel me? So, much like my Chick-fil-A letdown a couple of weeks ago, sometimes life is hard. I will say this, though. Chick-fil-A did drop off breakfast to our entire staff this week. So that's super nice. That was really great. And I had a very specific sausage and cheese biscuit in the bag. So that was also really great. Thank you, Lexington, for making that happen. And I also, on my own volition, I went back to the same Poplar Road thing because I am in love with Chick-fil-A, and there's nothing they can do to change that. Now, I want to make sure we keep our baseline for where we're at while we're talking about what we're talking about. So I'm going to run through these statistics that I've given every week just to remind people this is where you're at. If it's your first time, this gives you the foundation of why we're addressing this from a church perspective. The National Institute of Mental Health gives us these two newest statistics. 40 million adults in the United States experience anxiety disorders each year. 17.3 million adults in the United States experience at least one major depressive episode in the past year. That's an enormous number of individuals. When you look at a crowd that's this size, we will have somewhere between 680 and 780 people on campus today. So if you just think about the math, right, and look at the numbers that are represented here, that's a large number of people just in terms of attending Foundation in person today that are walking through some really difficult mental health struggles. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention tell us this: 1 in 6 United States youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year, and that suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals aged 10 to 34 in the U.S. And the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration tell us these three statistics. 57% of adults with a mental illness receive no treatment. Here's a big one. Nearly 50% of people with a mental health disorder will experience a substance use disorder at some point in their lives. And 70% of youth and juvenile justice systems have at least one mental health condition, and 67% of them receive no treatment. Now, we started this conversation, this series, with a walk through a biblical story. It's a biblical story that now transcends the faith community, and it's made its way into all parts of our life. It's the story of David and Goliath. You hear sportscasters talk about it's a David versus Goliath type battle. And so it's a metaphor that's just reached into all kinds of places in the world. And we just walk through it, and simply, if you're not familiar with the story, I'll catch you up in about 90 seconds. There's a little boy, he's like a young teenager. He's got 3 older brothers that are fighting a war for the Israelites, or that was the Jewish people. And they were fighting another nation called the Philistines, or from a nation called Philistia. And they were at war with each other. They had yet to fight, but they were on the battlefield standing on opposite ends. And his father sent him to go check on his brothers and bring back a report. He was going to take them some food. So he went to visit his 3 brothers. While he was there was a guy by the name of Goliath. He walked out of the ranks of the other nation's army, and he started mocking God. He started mocking the nation of Israel. He was mocking the soldiers for the nation of Israel. And so he's listening to this, and the guy's just like, look, you send me your best fighter, I'm our best fighter. We're going to go 1v1. Whoever wins takes the whole thing. And that was the deal. And so he's openly mocking. And so David, this little boy, is looking at his older brothers. That he's like, man, you went to war. Like, this is a big deal. And he's looking at us like, why are we not doing something? Like, why haven't y'all gone and shut him up yet? And of course they're like, David, you're so stupid. You're just a little boy. Like, why are you even here? So he didn't do well with that. He goes to the king. David goes to the king and says, hey, why are we not going to shut this guy up? Why are we standing here and allowing him to mock our God, our army, and our people? Why are we doing this? And of course the king tells him, like, do this. Look, this is war. That's a big dude over there. He's huge. He's a warrior. Eventually David's like, I'll go fight him. And this is why. This is what David teaches. David says, hey, here's the deal. It doesn't matter if you send a teenage boy, like a 13, 14-year-old. It doesn't matter if you send me. You can send my older brothers. You can send anybody in our army. King, you could go yourself. It doesn't matter who you send to fight Goliath. And honestly, it doesn't even matter who you're sending us to fight. It can be Goliath. It can be the entire army. It can be anyone in that army. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you send. It doesn't matter who you send us against. The only thing that matters in this conversation is who's doing the sending. And God's doing the sending. So he's already decided victory is ours. So send me, send my brothers, send you, send anybody you want to against whoever they've got. God's already decided. This is a spiritual decision. This is not a physical thing where it's like, oh, I'm little and he's big. He's got skill. I don't have skill. It's not that kind of decision. It's a spiritual decision. However, once David made that decision and he says, look, I'll go fight him because it doesn't matter who. This is a spiritual decision. I'll go fight the giant. David didn't go out on the battlefield and say, hey, I need everybody to bow your heads, close your eyes, and we're going to pray the giant away. Like, that's not what he did. No, David went to a stream and he got 5 really very tangible stones. And he took his legit sling and a staff, tools that he could hold in his hand. And he went and said, hey, though this is a spiritual decision, this comes out of my spiritual worldview, I'm about to fight you with something that's very physical. In other words, I've got tools at my disposal that my spiritual life is going to inform how to use them. And that's exactly what David did. David slings a stone right through the head of Goliath. I don't know if you understand, like we kind of say, oh, it hit him and it knocked him out. No, he put this stone through the man's head. He then took the guy's sword, cut his head off and held it up and then took it to the king of Israel. That's what David did. He's like 13 years old, walking with a giant's head with a hole in it, by the way, from a stone, saying, hey, fellas, I told you, it didn't matter who you send or who we're going against. God already decided. This is what God decided. This is what headless giant looks like. You know what I'm saying? That's what happened. Now, we started week 1 with that. Everything is spiritual. Everything starts with our spiritual worldview. However, we've got to have real, everyday, like real world tools to go into battle with. Thoughts and prayers, when it comes to our mental health struggles, are not going to get the job done. You can't just pray and think everything is going to get better in your life and everything is going to get easier. There are things, very specific things that you've got to undertake. And so week 1, we talked about the role of therapy and counseling. And we brought counselors onto campus. They've been here both for week 2, week 3, and they're here for week 4. They have tents outside. We've encouraged everyone to go to a tent every single week to meet and introduce them, right? We've talked about the role of therapy and counseling. Week 2, or excuse me, I guess technically it was week 3, tool 2. We had a panel up here to talk about the idea of resiliency. Where do we find resiliency? How do we come up with it? Where does it come from? How do we teach our children to be more resilient? And we heard from therapists and folks that have poured their life into the idea of resilience, right? That's what we heard last week. This week, we have something that I think is pretty significant. While we've included this particular crew, I think every year that we've done this for the last, 5, 6 years, we've never had a chance to get or dive specifically into and allow you to hear from them, which is our friends and neighbors, Kawita Force. And so I'm actually going to stop talking, and I'm going to ask if Hank Arnold, the executive director and founder of Kawita Force, which is a recovery community organization, would come and share with you his story and why he does what he does and why it's an incredible piece and place and part of who we are as a community in downtown Newnan. Would you please welcome Hank Arnold to the stage? Get him.
Good morning. Full house tonight or today. How are y'all? All right. Super grateful to be here. I appreciate when this speaking series first started, I thought it was pretty bold of Clint to say what he just said, which was, we're not going to thoughts and prayers our way out of this. And I thought it was pretty bold in a church that we say that. But I also have to say, that's also been my experience in this process, in this journey. And I'm going to share a little bit of my personal story. But before I get into that, obviously we have a tent out here, and we're basically neighbors. Just across the parking lot is our what do we have, 8,400 square feet, where we do addiction recovery support services every single day. And is anybody familiar with that building? Anybody rode by during the day and just saw like people outside? And it's like, what are they doing over there? Those people are getting better. That's what they're doing over there. It's a really, really, really cool thing to see people get better. Families restored, lives saved, people going on to live purposeful and passionate lives about a mission that God has put in their hearts. It's a beautiful thing to watch restoration happen in the lives of other people. And the reason why I'm so passionate about the mission is that I'm also a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is I haven't used alcohol or any other drug to change the way I think, feel, or act in almost 15 years. Give it up. And that might not sound like a big deal to people in here that haven't struggled with substance use, but for people that know that struggle, you know that's a big deal. And it's not about the length of time, right? But the time, I think, talks about the change in the heart. The sustained long-term recovery, it's not even about the drink or the drug if we really get down to it. It's a deeper situation, right? I'm looking for a chemical solution to my spiritual problem, and I found that in a substance. You know, that's why I'm passionate about the mission of Kawita Force. Kawita Force exists to provide recovery support services in the community for individuals and family members impacted by addiction. And everybody sitting in this place today knows somebody that does or has struggled. None of us are immune to it. As a matter of fact, substance use disorder is the number one cause of death for Americans between the age of 18 and 45. Number one cause of death. And nobody's talking about it. And I also know the reason why people aren't talking about it is because they look at people that struggle with addiction and say they chose that. And I'm not taking away the responsibility for the individual that the individual needs to have for the decisions that they make. But by the time it's a problem, they're no longer making a conscious, rational decision. That what started out as a solo cup or whatever at 17, 18 years old at a high school party doesn't impact everybody's life the same way. And you don't know you have a problem until it's a problem. And by the time it's a problem, it's out of control. It's the most baffling thing I've ever worked with. And I have it. And I work with people every single day that have it. But to see it play out in the lives of people that I care about still blows my mind. I still don't fully understand it. But I'll tell you, I have strategically put myself in a place to where I get to see the miracle happen for as many people as possible. That's a beautiful thing. Once somebody gets connected with a community, and I can't take away the importance of community. When it's my secret and I'm struggling in the dark, I can't get better with something that I don't have control over. It does require me to do something different. It does require me to get a little bit vulnerable, and it maybe not in a group, but at least with somebody that I know that may be solution-focused, that cares about me, that I have a responsibility to myself and the people that I care about to have that conversation. But how do you have a conversation about something that you're extremely ashamed of as a grown-up? How do you get help for something you can't have a conversation about? I just don't know. You know, so I'm going to share a little bit about my story. One of the things that I appreciate about this is because my wife and I have been attending this church for probably about 2 years now. And I think it's also important to let people know who I am. I know that a lot of times you may see me greeting people walking in the door, and you may know a little bit about the mission of the organization, but I think being able to really get in there and pull the curtain back, because I'm going to share some of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, and the tragic, and all the things that life is, because none of us get out of here without those things. I'm going to share those things in a very intimate and open and transparent way. And I'm hoping that my heart connects with your heart. And I'm hoping that I can glorify God in the process, because my life has been a miracle after miracle after miracle. And not in a way of parting of the seas or the clouds or the burning bush, but in the places that I showed up to, and I received exactly what I needed in that time. And I know that it was ordained and orchestrated by God. And it was just a beautiful thing. And it's an undeniable thing in my experience. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that God's hand has been a big, big part of my life. And so I want to share that with you today. I ran over a little bit earlier, but today, this afternoon, is the second service. You don't have anywhere to be. So I was born and raised in Griffin, Georgia. Everybody know where Griffin, Georgia is? Oh, man. Most people know about Griffin. They usually pass through there going somewhere better, They're either going to the lake or to the beach, or maybe they got a speeding ticket on Highway 16, or maybe you dated some crazy girl from that town. Maybe you got on probation there. But either way, that's where I'm from Spalding County. I bring photos because I think they tell the story, right? They tell the story of a transformed life for sure. And these photos kind of outline some of the story that I'm going to be telling today. I lost my father at the age of 6. Probably one of my earliest memories. He was struggled with addiction, primarily alcohol. And he was in a single car accident, and it cost him his life in 1984 when I was 6 years old. And that was a traumatic experience for me. I didn't know how to process death. I loved my dad. I know that he was a little wild, but one of the things that I loved is that we would ride dirt roads, and I would throw beer bottles at stop signs. Now that sounds crazy, right? But as a 6-year-old, that was like amazing. Beer bottles at stop signs. That was like, I think he really, really wanted to be the father that he was called to be, but substance use did not allow him to show up in that capacity consistently. Not consistently. And lost my father really, really early, and I didn't adjust well to that. I ended up having to repeat the first grade. I got a diagnosis of ADHD, and they gave me a stimulant called Ritalin. And in the 3rd grade, I found out if I took 2 or 3 of those, it did something to me that I really kind of liked, It's the equivalent of Adderall today, the prescription pharmaceuticals. Wouldn't you know that the stimulants ended up being a big, big part of my downfall, specifically. But I started experimenting with substances around the age of 12, 13 years old, and smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol. And one of the things that happened for me during that time was something really cool happened, right? So we have this brain that the human brain is a series of chemical reactions, and we have chemicals in our brain like dopamine and serotonin and all these good things that fire off into the receptors, and it creates a euphoric feeling, like a really cool thing, like the birth of your first child, the graduation that you experience. Some really cool thing happens, and then natural reward happens in the brain. But what happened for me at age 12 and 13, 14 years old was I didn't have to do anything. I could just put something in my body, and it made everything inside of me chill out and be okay. And I fell in love with that. From a very early age, I felt like I could talk to people that I couldn't talk to. I felt like I could fit in places and circles that I didn't fit into. I felt like the noise in my head was quiet, and I felt like I was at peace. The only problem is that is an artificial replication of something that happens naturally, and I became very addicted to that. And as things go on, I get introduced to more and harder substances. By the time I was 18, I probably have used every substance in just about every possible way it could go into my body. By the time I was 15, I was in treatment. 16, I was in juvenile detention. 17 years old, I was in the county jail as an adult. They had just changed the law that you can go into the county jail as an adult at the age of 17 from 18. And then at 18 years old, it was in the state penitentiary. My graduating class was walking the field, and I'm at Jackson State Prison classification, getting ready to go serve 3 years. That's my mugshot, top left. The other ones around that are also other mugshots. At 18 years old, those are very, very formative years. What were you doing at 18? Getting ready to graduate, hanging out with your friends, planning your senior trip. I'm in prison. Now, I'm not negating the fact that I have a responsibility. I'm not saying that there's not a need for a criminal justice system. I'm not saying there's not a need for punitive measures. However, an 18-year-old probably could have had some other type of intervention than 3 years in the state penitentiary. And I served 3 years. I go in when I'm 18. I come out when I'm 21. And I don't get anything other than don't come back. And here's your probation papers. That's it. That's what I landed with. That was literally all that I landed with. I had a trash bag full of clothes. And I showed back up. Guess where? To the same place they picked me up from. Because that's all I had. And what do you think happens when you're in an environment that doesn't support wellness and recovery, and you go off and then you come back to that same environment with the same friends, with the same people, with the same everything? What do you think happens? And the thing that's wild to me is while I was in that situation, I'm sitting on a top bunk in Phillips State Prison off of Rock Quarry Road in Buford, Georgia, and there's no air conditioning, and there's 130 men in an open dormitory, and you can see the bathrooms. There's no privacy. Showers, bathrooms, just complete. It's animalistic for sure. And I'm sitting on a top bunk in the middle of summertime, and I'm telling myself, I'll never do what I did that got me here. I'll never, and like in my heart of hearts, 1,000% mean it. However, I get out and I get back into the same environment. And just me wanting to do something different doesn't actually, it's a good thing to want something different, don't get me wrong, but just wanting something different doesn't actually make it happen. Like I have to do something different. And one of the most simplest phrases that the simplicity of things is very, very attractive to me. And it seems to be the most profound, like this phrase: if you want something you've never had before, you've got to do some things you've never done before. And that sounds like incredibly simple. But I'm just like, well, that was like brand new information to me. If I want something I've never had, I've got to do some things I've never done. If I want an outcome that's different than the outcome that keeps playing out in my life, I've got to do some different stuff. And, I have my first son when I'm 21 years old. I've been out of prison a very short period of time. I found a girlfriend that was going to fix me. What a job. That's so unfair. So unfair. And honestly, the desires of my heart were from a good place, but the way in which I would go about getting my desires met was very unhealthy. A person can't change me, nor is that their responsibility. And we have a son. His name is Sebastian Arnold. He was born on September 29th, 1999. Y'all know what today is? September 29th, 2024. Today he's 25. And that boy, I've got a photo of him on my chest, changed my life. Like I wanted to show up in a different capacity than what I had as a father. And I stopped making the really, really high-risk decision. I stopped going to jail, and I stopped going to prison. However, substance use was still a challenge for me. And as much as I wanted to prioritize my family, because this is how I operate, and I don't know about anybody else's story, but for me, I can't use a drink or a drug of any style, of any type, in any setting, without it eventually taking over and becoming the primary focus in my life. I can't do it. That's like first step stuff. Like I got to be able to acknowledge in my heart of hearts who I am. And I didn't know that yet. I thought if I could just stay away from this and just engage in that, or just do it with these parameters, like I would be able to fix it and manage it, and it never, ever, ever happened. It never happened. So in 2009, several years later, after one failed long-term relationship with the mother of my son, now at the age of 10 years old, and you see in the center bottom, those are the babies when they were small. The one in the middle is actually sitting on the front row and hating that I'm calling her out right now. But after one failed relationship, one failed marriage with the mother of my two oldest daughters that are 6 and 8 at this time, and in a marriage that had similar characteristics of previous relationships with a 1-year-old daughter, which was the baby, my life had become a series and pattern of reoccurring destruction with addiction at the core of the dysfunction with 4 children. Now I father 4 children. I've got this honest desire to show up and be the person that I am, or the person that they need me to be. But honestly, I wasn't equipped for it mentally, spiritually. As much as I wanted these things weren't happening. And what I found was this reoccurring pattern in my life. And I don't know, I think everybody kind of has like whatever that thing is. My thing actually just happens to be very, very destructive. But everybody's got a thing as a human, right? We all have a thing that we do that we say we wish we didn't do because of whatever reason. Maybe we feel conviction or guilt, shame, and remorse or whatever it is. And we promise ourselves we're not going to do it again, and then like the pain of that leaves, and then we do it again. You know, that calls on me to like lean on something bigger than me, outside of myself, to address that. And it took me some time to get to that place. I reluctantly agreed to go to a church service in September of 2009. I ended up going to Rock Springs Church with like Dr. Benny Tate because I lived in Griffin. I went to Rock Springs Church, and they do an altar call there, and it's very interesting how that goes down. But I was just there to check the box. Like, I had back problems. Everybody was on my back because like my life was such a mess. They were like, get this dude in church right away. And I'm also a recovering Pentecostal. I don't know if anybody identifies with that. But I had been prayed over. I had enough oil put on my head to fry chicken, and I still struggled with this thing that, like, I couldn't shake it. It was so powerful in my life, and addiction was my Goliath. And quite honestly, like, I couldn't do it by myself, which was like a devastating, but also like the rest of my life is beautiful because of that process, because of like my relationship to surrender, my relationship to honesty, my relationship to getting vulnerable with a network of people that care for me and want the absolute best for me. Like, that is the way in which I do life. And without this experience, like, I wouldn't be where I am today. As tragic and devastating as it is, and as much destruction took place, like, that is a beautiful part of like the tragic, beautiful part of like my story, that God is all up in it. That God can take anybody or anything, no matter what your age is, no matter what you've been through, no matter where you come from, and can do something really cool with you for Him. And when I'm living in God's will, and when I'm taking prompts from the God that loves me and cares for me, the outcome is beautiful no matter what it is. Like my mentor would say, it's not your business what God has for you. It's your business just to show up and do what He asks on a day-to-day basis. And it's not even a big thing. It's like, in the moment, do the next right thing. Like, I don't even have to complicate it. Like, what is God's will for my life? I was talking with somebody that's in the service right now yesterday. What is God's will for my life? I was like, I don't really know what God's will for my life always is, but I know what it's not. And so as long as I'm like not doing what it's not, then I'm probably doing what it is. And it doesn't even have to be complicated, because I can complicate this stuff. And I was just done. And I had been introduced because in 2002 I had a DFACS case. Do you guys know who DFACS is? DFACS stands for Division of Family and Children's Services. And I don't have the ability to show up and be a responsible father when I'm actively using substances. In 2002, I was mandated to go to these things called meetings. And I would show up with my paper, and I'd get it signed, and I'd do the drug test. And, you know, I really didn't struggle with addiction, because people that really, really struggle with addiction can't go 12 months without putting a drink or drug in their body. But I could. I do pretty good when I'm supervised. I do pretty well when I'm supervised, and there's, you know, and again, going back to where my heart was, I just wanted to be the father that I didn't have. And so, like, for me, I went a year without using. And nothing on the inside changed. I would show up, I would check a box. I never did anything with heart and real passion. I was showing up and doing those things because it was mandated. But what I knew is I would go to these meetings where people were getting better. And I just didn't want any part of that, because I wasn't like them. I was special. I was just so special, right? And my first year of recovery was getting unspecial. Like, my mom thinks I'm special, which is great, and my grandparents surely thinks I'm special. But let's be real, I'm not any more special than anybody else in this room or anybody else in any other room that I show up. And the honest truth is, my first year was spent being unspecial and just doing what everybody else in that room was doing to get and stay well, and just following the direction. which was really hard for me because I'm accustomed to like making a decision and like getting an outcome. And like if the outcome doesn't come quick enough, especially like if I'm in 30 days of recovery and I'm shaking and I'm throwing up out of both ends, I know that's graphic and awful, but like that's the reality of it. And like if I don't get this like relief and feel and get my life back as quickly as I think I need to do it, I just go back and revert to what I came from. Like that attitude for me was no longer acceptable. I had this experience at church and they did an altar call and my brain said, don't go, don't go, don't go. That's ridiculous. And my feet went. And I'd like to say, oh, from then on out, like I had this amazing experience and boom, and I sprouted wings and I got this halo and everything. But I continued to use for about 4 more months. And it got really bad. I got beat up for my last $20 by a really small guy with a pink silk shirt on, wearing a bolo tie while his buddies held me down. And my right eye was just like not good. I had a couple of hospital visits, and they're like, wow, you're back again. Yeah, that's what happens when I leave and go back to where I came from. And it just really wasn't working out. And so what started occurring for me is every time I used, instead of providing this euphoric escape, it intensified the reality of the truth that I came face to face with at that church service. That God was for me, that God loves me, that he is a good, good God calling me out of the darkness into the light of life, and that he's got something amazing for me, and that I don't have to hurt myself or anybody else that I care about any longer if I don't want to. And that's a haunting thought when you're trying to escape everything. And it really, really intensified it. And you know, in January the 10th, 2010 was my last drink and drug. It was a Sunday. I haven't had a drink or drug since. I've been completely mind and mood altering free since January the 11th, 2010. It's beautiful. And everything's a process. You know, I hear people talk about, and I'm a big fan of deliverance. I know God is a big, big God. God is a huge God, and God can do all kinds of things. He's everything. He's everything or he's nothing. But my process has just been that, a process. And the thing I don't like about the word process is it means it's not all happening right now. There are lessons I have to learn. There are people I need to meet. There are things that that need to be challenged within me. There are a lot of things that happens in this process. I mean, how do you know a life that you've never lived before? I've been incarcerated since I was 15. I went to prison when I was 18. Every relationship, everything I touched turned to not good. Like, I'm 32 years old. I have a 9th grade education. I have 6 felony convictions on my record. The guy that probably my family looks at and say, we love him, but he'll never get it. My mom used to pray, I just hope he's in jail. Like that was like, no mom should ever have to pray that for their child. I hope my son is in jail because I know he's alive and I know that he's safe. Every year at my anniversary, my recovery anniversary, you know who's sitting on the front row? My mother. We have a great relationship. She's a trip. She's been through it, man. She's been through it. So I made a decision to do something different. I showed back up to that meeting. I started getting engaged with people. I got unspecial. I did the things that they said I needed to do. And desperation only takes me so far. So I show up, and the desperation that is the destruction and devastation of my life is enough motivation for me to show up pretty consistently for the first few weeks. But after that, I'm leaving my home group, and I'm driving home, and I have this thought: you could probably do one. Which terrified me because I thought for sure these consequences and the way that I felt and what was happening for me in my life was going to be enough to sustain my recovery. And what I realized is that if I didn't do some work on my insides, my outsides would use again. I knew that because it wasn't about the length of time that I had without a drink or a drug in my body. It was about what I did in that time to sustain my recovery long term, to get me as far away from that place spiritually and emotionally as possible. And that I was set forth with the challenge to do that work, which is the hard work, which is to look inside of me, like all the inside of me. But the deal is, I knew that if I didn't change, I would do the same thing that I'd always done. And that was motivation enough for me to get busy. And so I found a guy that I could trust, and I told him things. We all got some things, right? We got a handful of things that we just, if we're really honest and we sit with some of this stuff that we think about, that we just shudder and that I just take to my grave. I found a guy that I could trust with everything. And then I also found a God that already knows everything and that can use that stuff to be of service to other people. And it was a beautiful thing. So the first 3 parts of this process was trusting God. The second middle part was learning how to clean house, cleaning up my inside. And the last part of the process is once I have something to give away, that I give it away freely. You ever take a flight and when they say, in case of an emergency landing, oxygen masks are going to fall from the ceiling. You're going to put the mask on who first? Before putting it on who? That's right. You put it on yourself first. And once you learn some things and you have some experience and you can be used for something else, then you can share that freely. It's been my experience. I got laid off in November of 2011. I was doing construction. I was actually really good at it. I came home from prison, and my next door neighbor had a construction contracting company. Nobody else would hire me. Nobody else would hire me. I didn't have a GED or high school diploma, and I had a felony criminal record, and nobody else would hire me. I really feel like the job picked me. And actually, I got pretty good at it. And I was operating heavy equipment, and before you know it, I was a foreman, and then I was leading 2 or 3 crews, keeping the job laid out, and I was really, really good at it. The only thing about it is, like that field wasn't very conducive to recovery for me, for the company I was working for the people that I was interacting with, for the hours that we were working. But my first 2 years of recovery, I worked that job, and I was really good at it. I made good money, and I was able to get by, limp along financially. I had a young lady that was a member of my home group that worked for a treatment provider, and they were hiring a male resident assistant to work with the young adult population between the ages 17 and 27. And I applied for the position, and I was up against 5 other people that were a lot more qualified than me, but they hired me for the position, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I got hired. My first day was January the 3rd, 2012. I love it so much, I remember the date. It was a big deal for me. I had almost 2 years of recovery, and I decided to go back to school and get an education for addictions counseling. I had to go get my GED first, which was the whole thing. At 34 years old, going back to school, I hadn't sat in a classroom since 9th grade. And I got my GED pretty quickly and started classes. And about 2 months later, I come home from work one day, and my wife at the time, and y'all know what that means, she said, I didn't sign up for this. All this church and support meetings and all these new friends, I didn't sign up for this, and I'd like a divorce. And it was devastating to me. But that was one of the first real life things that happened, because it's so easy to be in recovery. When I'm walking down the street and the birds are chirping, the sun is shining, all my bills are paid, it is kind of easy, right? And I think our faith journey takes a pretty similar kind of perspective on that. But what happens when life shows up? Am I in recovery or am I not? Do I believe or do I not? Right? And this is the part where things are challenged in me. Am I? Am I going to stay the course? What am I going to do? This is typically where I blow my life up. I do gasoline and matches so good. I'm so good with gas and matches, But I had a choice. I hadn't had a drink or a drug and enough time to make some rational decisions. The obsession and the compulsion to put this substance in my body to make me okay, that was gone. That was lifted. God was working in my life. He was moving so big. Like I knew God had me. I would get off work, the second shift job on Monday nights in East Point, Atlanta, and I would drive around the perimeter and go to this, it was a meeting off Moreland Avenue called a New Beginning Group. And the reason why they called it a New Beginning Group, because the meeting was from 11:30 at night till 1 a.m. And they called it a New Beginning Group because you started your day there. And I would drive around there. I'd get off at 11. That meeting would start at 11:30, and I would share about where I was at, the pain that I was experiencing, and just looking for some experience, strength, and hope to get me through the process. And Mr. Lewis in there said this, and I'll never forget it. He said, "This isn't anything new. It's just your turn. And you got a responsibility to get through this the way God wants you to get through this, because you got somebody else coming in behind you that needs to have that experience." And I was like, "That's right, Mr. Lewis." I felt like I was charged with a responsibility in that moment. And no matter how bad it hurt, like I wasn't going to self-destruct. As a matter of fact, my meeting attendance, I joined them in small group at church. I even started a 1 day a week, 1 year internship at a community service provider for the addictions counseling certification I was going for. And wouldn't you know it, as God would have it, the same counselor that was my direct supervisor was my same counselor when I was 15 years old receiving treatment at that same place. God is so big. And do you know what that did for her, for me to come back? Like, it's just like, her name's Rosalind Bourne. She's a beautiful lady. Absolute beautiful lady. She's got the most beautiful heart. We stay connected. She gets a Christmas card. She gets a Christmas card. Now I have a Christmas card where I'm wearing pajamas, and we got the dogs, and it's pretty wild, like what my life looks like today. Straight sellout, you know? From the streets to sellout. I'm cool with it, though. I'm so cool with it. I'm so cool with it, man. You know, but I'll tell you, man, as hope evolved into faith, this cleared the path for a deeper surrender. That this was the deal. God, I don't want it if it's not what you want for me. Like, truly, in my heart, that was my prayer every single day. I was broke. I was working this job, this entry-level job, making $13 an hour as a full grown-up. But I knew God had me. I had 2 roommates. I didn't have cable. I had a flip phone. That's how broke I was. But like, I had the most freedom I had ever experienced in my life because God was carrying me through. I knew this was part of the process. Those were some good days, man, honestly, despite the devastation and the wreckage and the rebuilding. Like, the cool thing about rebuilding, though, is that you get to pick and choose what you invite back into your life. And I eliminated every negative association that I had completely. I'd see people, and I'd just say, "Hey, see ya." And they say, "Man, you think you're better than us." I was like, "No, I don't. I just can't hang out with you because your consequences aren't my consequences. I love you. I want the best for you, but I can't hang out with you." I become being very firm on like who I was and who God was and what that relationship looked like. And I didn't have anything else. I was stripped down to like nothing. I just want what you have for me. So that my first prayer was, "God, I don't want it if it's not for you." My second prayer was, "God, if you open the door, I promise I'll walk through it. No matter how scary it is, no matter how much I feel not equipped, if there's an opportunity." So Clint asked me to do this. And my first response was absolutely not, like in my head. And I was like, "Sure, I'd love to." You know, like that's the way it works for me. I think just about everything is an opportunity, right? To show up and do this work. And it's very fitting that it's on this day. But I'll go on to say, you know, in 2013, my 2 oldest daughters' mother was really struggling. And when we were married, she didn't really struggle with substance use. That was really kind of my thing. And that was a big cause of us being divorced. And then as time went on, she really kind of struggled and consumed a little bit more alcohol. She's a great mother. She's a loving mother, very resourceful, very kind, very smart. But she developed a medical condition as a result of her drinking. And I got temporary custody of my kids in 2013. In 2014, after a year, she continued to not have the resources and the support to get and stay better, and she actually lost her life to substance use, which was really difficult for my daughters that were 9 and 11. It was really hard. And at that time, this was at Grady Memorial Hospital. And we got the call. I was at work, and they said, it was my ex-father-in-law calling me, just like blowing me up at work. And it's like, why is my ex-father-in-law calling me? It's never good. And I take the call after a group that I was running, and they said, Rebecca's not doing well, and if the girls want to see their mother alive, you need to get them to Grady. And so myself and Michaela and Janie and my wife Shelly was at her bedside when she took her last breath. And as devastating as that is, the part is that I could show up for my kids in a different way. Like, where would my kids be if their dad wasn't in recovery? Like, where would they be? And that I have this amazing responsibility to show up and take care of these teenage girls as a relatively new in recovery dad that we're just kind of learning together. But I was down for it. I was 1,000% down for it, and I was super grateful for the opportunity to be in my children's life, because after all, that was the desire of my heart, and that these things are being restored to me. And then I don't get a choice in how they are restored. This circumstance and situation was very unfortunate. However, this is the situation that I was in, and it was I was called to do it. You ever felt called by God to do something? Truly. You do that with everything. You do that with everything. And for the first time in my life, man, I was charged with this responsibility to not only stay well for myself, but I got these other 2 sweet girls that I have to set an example for. And I met Shelly, and, we dated. We just did things different. I would say previously, I wasn't in relationships. It was more like a hostage situation. And the hostage it could swap roles depending upon what day it was. And we just did things different. We dated different. She brought Lexi with her, who's also on the front row. I got a chance to officially adopt Lexi. So right-hand side below Sebastian, you see me picking up Lexi in front of the courthouse. It was a great day. Got to officially adopt Lexi as my own, which is super cool because she's a really special girl. I actually got to baptize Lexi right here on the stage earlier this year. Her name is one of these names behind me. And when I did, man, I don't know if you guys saw it, but I put her in there. I was like, dude, we're about to do this like we mean it. You know what I'm saying? And we did. I thought it was amazing. It looked great. It was fantastic. And it's really cool to see what God's doing in her heart, in her life right now. My life, and I'd started this thing called Kawita Force before Shelly and I met. And it actually wasn't called Kawita Force then. It was called Kawita Recovery Community Organization. And I thought our logo was great. It was kind of hideous now that I look back on it. And Shelly got involved. So I had an event, and then by the time we had the second event in 2016, I had met Shelly, and she had come on board and was trying to help us look better. And she did a great job of that. And one of the things that we did in 2017, we just need to find a place to start providing recovery support services. So we got with Bridging the Gap. They let us use a room on Monday nights. We would partner with churches that would provide a meal. So we would do a meal from 6 to 7. And from 7 to 8, we would have a meeting that had childcare. And when we started, there was about 8 people there. And about 6 months later, there would be 50 to 60 people there. I know, it was a really cool thing. So we just found a place to start. We were working our regular jobs. I would leave work at 6 a.m. I wouldn't get home till 10 p.m. that night. But it was a really cool thing. I saw people getting connected. And then we got our articles of incorporation in 2017. 2018, we applied for our 501c3 tax identification number. And a month later, we had it. 2 months after that, we applied for 2 grants that gave us a year of sustainability. And then I was charged with this responsibility of leaving this job I went on to get my certification and got a pretty good increase. I had gotten 5 promotions the time that I was there, and I was the program coordinator and manager of transitional programs, but I was charged with this responsibility. Hey, you have a year of sustainability, but I had this nice corner office with a 401k with 8% matched. I don't know about y'all, dude. That's pretty bus. I had 40 hours a week of PTO, and I was on a salary. Like, I don't know. It was hard to leave. Now I have marketplace affordable health care. I actually took a pay cut to go work twice as many hours. But there was no way God had prepared me for me to pass that opportunity off to somebody else. Not a chance. Kawita Force is now in its 6th-year operation. Last year, we served over 26,000 people right here in this community. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And then I get to do this right here beside my wife, which is so cool. So there's a total of 9 staff members. Marissa's one of our staff members. She's on the front row. She is our emergency department manager. We have a contract with Piedmont, Noonan, and Fayette. We have badges with like the Piedmont, like it's wild. It's blowing my mind like all the time. And that if somebody comes into that hospital on a substance-related injury or overdose, we're paid to go and provide peer support services in that moment, in that setting. What a cool thing. We all are people in long-term recovery with our own personal stories that are also certified peer specialists. Cool thing, man. That for once in my life, like my experience can be leveraged for something good. So, December 2021, my son Sebastian, top right-hand corner. Doesn't he look good? He's a good-looking kid, isn't he? He was taking 3 weeks. He was doing a mechanical HVAC apprenticeship out in Oklahoma City, actually just a little south of Oklahoma City in a college town called Norman, Oklahoma. And he just bought a new car, and he was fully self-supporting. 23 years old. He was in love with this girl named Riley Lester, and he was coming back here for Christmas to be with his family. We had 3 whole weeks with him. We had a great Christmas, and my wife usually has us doing those matching pajama with the dog Christmas photos like in October and November, but Sebastian hadn't been able to be a part of our photos, so she was like, we're not doing Christmas cards this year. We're going to do photos when Sebastian gets here. And because he's not been a part of our family photos. On January the 4th, he left here, headed back to Oklahoma City. It was him and his girlfriend, Riley. They were driving through the night. I don't know why he loved to drive through the night, but he would just drive through the night, and he'd just pull over long enough to use the bathroom and get like a Celsius and like get back on the road. And he would drive through the night, and he was about 30 minutes west of Memphis, Tennessee, in St. Francis County, Arkansas, mile marker 258, and an impaired driver got on the interstate going the wrong direction. And they were traveling eastbound in a westbound lane on Interstate 40, and they were struck head-on, and neither one of them survived the accident. This was January 2022, not even 2 years ago. Nothing can prepare you to lose a child. Absolutely nothing. Devastating how substance use still is playing a part in my life, even in my recovery. The driver that's responsible survived the accident. But if I really got to get honest with myself, I mean, honestly, and this is how I know God has like moved in my heart. Like, as much as I want to hate 33-year-old Daniel Charles Brown from North Little Rock, Arkansas, that's got a rap sheet the size of my arm, it's got a rap sheet the size of mine. If I'm really honest, how many times have I driven and didn't have any business driving? I mean, if I'm really honest with myself, like there's something in me that has something for him other than hate. And I don't know what that is, and it changes from day to day, but I do know this, but the same big God that loves me also loves him. I know that's true. I feel like we were robbed, we were shortchanged, and it's not fair. But I also, on today, get to honor my son on his birthday by talking about him. And when Clint said, will you on this day? Absolutely. You know, this is like the real stuff, like, am I in recovery or am I not? Do I believe that God says who he is or do I not? And there were little things throughout the story. As a matter of fact, there was a truck driver, a father and daughter truck driving team that travels from Chapel Hill, North Carolina to California twice a month. And she looked us up on social media and she said, I was behind your boy when it happened. And we were on the side of that interstate at 2 o'clock in the morning. Your son wasn't by himself. We were praying over your son. Right? And I can't help but like find like the moments where God is like making it bearable for my heart in those situations. That photo was a week before we lost him. Beautiful. In those situations, the summer before we lost him, I had 3 days in June that I cleared my schedule and flew out to Oklahoma and spent 3 days with my boy. So grateful I did that. And some things that have come out of that, right, is not only deepening my faith and my relationship with God, but man, let me tell you, if you got somebody you care about and things aren't right, man, make it right. I'm telling you, make it right. If you did something you need to make right, make it right. 1,000%. I was so grateful because during our time, we had some unresolved stuff. My son and I did. We did that stuff, that 3 weeks he was here. And I'm just looking at the grace of God in that situation, that I had the opportunity to show up and own my stuff. It's beautiful. It was beautiful. The trial set for the week of December the 2nd this year, almost 2 years later. As God would have it, my wife and I are expecting in about 3 weeks with our son. Which is a beautiful thing, right? I feel like everything that I do, I'm just thinking like, how can I honor Sebastian in everything that I do? And we have pictures of Sebastian all over our house. He'll know who his big brother is. He'll know how awesome he was. He'll know how big his heart was. And that none of us get out of this world without experiencing hurt. You know? But in my life, God is who he says he is. God does big things for me, man, every single day. And he does it in the lives of people around me every single day. And that's why we do what we do. That's why we love it. Absolutely love it. There are people in this service right now that don't even know how important they are to me. Because seeing it happen for them reinforces what happened for me, the miracle that happened for me, how big God is in their lives. It's a beautiful thing. There's absolutely nothing wasted in a transformed life. Not anything. There's not one mistake I have made that's wasted when my life is lived in a different way. Not one thing. It's all relevant. It's all worth it. That's been my experience. There's not been one part of ugly that I haven't been able to leverage when I'm sitting knee to knee with somebody that says you don't understand. When I go into that county jail and they say, you don't know what it's like. I was like, oh, buddy, you might be wearing my flip-flops. Those might have been my flip-flops. In 2014, I applied for and received a full governor's pardon from Governor Nathan Deal. Talking about fully restored. I don't hunt, but I do have guns just because I can. Truly. Now to get in a little bit more about Kawita Force, and I'm going to wrap it up. I appreciate you guys' patience. I didn't want to shortchange it, though, because I was just like feeling where I was at. So thank you for your patience. But Kawita Force is peer support, an addiction recovery peer support center. We're located right here in downtown Newnan, Georgia. There are 47 other organizations like us around the state. And I'm not trying to like brag, I'm just speaking the facts. Nobody, absolutely nobody has the impact that our organization has. No other recovery community organization has the impact that our organization has. And that's really because we have a great team. It's really also because like we have a big, big God that just keeps giving us opportunity to show up and do the work. So we provide education, training. We do advocacy. Look at this, man. Bottom right-hand corner of the last photo, the governor. I mean, what? That's wild to me. We get to do advocacy work at our Georgia state capitol. We go to our nation's capital twice a year to do advocacy work. We're literally trying to change the hearts and minds of our legislation that trickles down to our community. We know that we can't arrest our way out of this dilemma. We also know as people in recovery that the best thing for that person, and I'm not taking anything away from counseling and therapy. We do coaching, and it's not an and or, it's a both and. But oftentimes when I'm meeting with a person or meeting with a family member, I'm thinking, man, I should have talked to you 5 years ago. Like, I don't know why we're the last stop for somebody that struggles with substance use. We should be the first stop for our family member. We should be the first stop for a friend. We should be the first stop for an individual that's even thinking about, do I want to do something different? We're not going to make you do stuff you don't want to do. We just want to engage you. We want to have a conversation. We want to share some of our lived experience, but then also let you know that there's a way out, that you do not have to continue on this road of destruction. There's something bigger available for you. And we do that through relationship. And that's the most valuable thing that we have as people, is our time. You can't buy that. You can't get it back. You know, and we give of our time regularly for people that we're meeting with. So we currently have 9 staff members. 7 of our staff are certified peer specialists offering one-on-one coaching at any phase of the recovery process or the pre-contemplation phase. Like, you don't even have to be in recovery. I have people that sit in my office that say, I'm high right now. And I'm like, man, you know, they're not having a good time. Like, they're in my office having a conversation with me about, like, actively using. They are not having fun. They are absolutely not having fun. We have 4 outreach programs. We have one in our jail and our prison. Coolest thing, man, going back into that jail and that prison. Love it. Absolutely love it. And those guys are listening. You want to talk about, like, the most captive audience, like, figuratively and, like, for real? Like, for real. They do not want to be there. They're listening. I can't tell you how many people, there are people in the service right now, this very minute, that I met them when they were incarcerated. And the day they got out, guess who they called? They called us. They're here today. Their life is in the process of being restored. They're with their family right now. Restoration, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's the most amazing thing to, like, be a part of. And then we have an outreach in our court system with our parent elected peer advocate program for parents that have DFACS involvement. We are 30 days from completion on our affordable housing initiative with a recovery focus. About 3 blocks from here, we have a duplex, brand new construction. Foundation Church was very generous and donated and sponsored a room. We are currently debt-free on that project. Huge, huge. That's 3,200 square feet. That's 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, debt-free. And I can't wait to see what God's going to do to the lives of people that get to be served in that place. I mean, I just know it's going to be huge. Because I think about, like, what I needed. I just needed some people to believe in me and show me the way out. I need people to be kind and patient with me. I need people to expose me to the love of God. I needed, more importantly than what I needed to be beat upside the head with Scripture, I needed somebody that demonstrated the action of what that actually means in their walk. I needed somebody to be in a relationship with me. I need somebody to guide me and teach me and to be available for me. And I'm so excited to be able to do that for other people because he freely did it for me. And I'm called for something bigger than me. And this is the deal. Regardless of my external circumstances, if I'm doing what God wants me to do, I'm going to be taken care of. It's going to be all right. 1,000%. No doubt about it. So thank you guys for your time. Thank you guys for listening. And thank you guys for just engaging with me long enough to make me feel comfortable to be able to share my insights with you guys. So thank you guys and have a great week.
I can't tell you the hundreds and hundreds of people that we are connected with, both from Foundation's side of things that are also interconnected with Kawita Force. The incredible thing about Kawita Force is that all of those things that he just mentioned, like let's say today you're like, you know what, I'm going to take a next step. You know, I want a piece of what Hank has found. I want to take a next step, and so I want to book a session this week. So you go to kawitaforce.org. You take a look at it. You're going to go to a peer coaching session. You're going to click on that. And then when you get to the end of it, you're going to hit submit. To submit, like you're going to choose a time. It's going to show what's available, all the coaches, whether you're looking for talk to a female or male, whatever it is. You're going to click on all that. You're going to get through it, hit the submit button, and then it's not going to ask you for anything else. There's no charge for it. So like he'll see any of you. Whether you're in the middle of addiction or a family member trying to figure it out, like all of those services he just mentioned, they cost nothing. Right? They cost nothing. We never get a bill, and we've sent dozens and dozens and dozens of our Foundation family to Kawita Force because of addiction's a big deal. And not once has Hank then sent over a bill to us and said, "Hey, this, I know it's our church, but this is our cost." But it's not even something he does for Foundation. That's across the board. It's anybody in our community. It's not a special rate we get. It's just the way they operate. Now, just because they don't send us a bill, though, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be supportive. So we have been setting aside funds here at Foundation through the offering that we take up each week. And so this week, we will be sending a check for $10,000 to Kawita Force just to say thank you. Not all problems in our community can be solved by writing a check. I think my favorite way for us to be involved is to send people and to get our hands dirty. But also the reality is that for organizations like Kawita Force, while checks don't solve everything, they certainly help. And so we will always want to be an asset, whether Kawita Force and Hank and Shelley are a forever part of Foundation or God just has them here for this particular season. The work that they're doing in Coweta County is, as Hank said, it's unmatched. And we are so blessed, lucky, should be incredibly grateful that just across the street and past the grass there next to our parking lot is 8,400 square foot that's dedicated to addiction recovery, counseling, coaching. It's an incredible asset, and the more our community is aware of it, the better off our community will be.